Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the Call of Cthulhu adventure Blackwater Creek. Written by Scott Dorward, the scenario appears in the 7th edition Keeper's Screen Pack. Now for those wondering if they have failed their sanity save and they're asking themselves, didn't Seth cover this one already? Yes, 6.5 years ago, in the very first month of my channel, the video and audio quality of that old video were simply dreadful, and I hadn't quite figured out what my review style was yet, but people were still discovering my channel through that video, and assuming that its quality represented what the quality of my videos were currently, they were noping out of watching anymore, so I've decided to go ahead, take that old video down, redo it, and expand upon it, as I've done with a couple more of my early videos.
And that review was before you hired me on, which is honestly when your channel started getting good.
Now for those out there who are upset by my redoing old videos and thinking it destroys an essential historical record or some such, don't despair. You can find a link down in the video description below if you want to watch that original video. But enough about that, on with the new. Coming in at 36 pages with a few more pages for optional pre-generated characters, the scenario was pretty short. It's possible to complete the adventure in just a single session, but I would advise keepers to plan for at least 2 sessions. It's really difficult to judge how long this is going to take because it is a sandbox adventure. It offers us the town of Blackwater Creek, some key characters, some locations, but there's no set order that the player characters have to do anything in, so it's really up to them how long it's going to take. So your players might go to the key objectives, right out the gate and be done in only a few hours, or they could be like how my players were and they wander around to every single location one after another and requiring multiple sessions in order to do it. But the coolest part about this scenario is that it offers us 2 completely different hooks as to how the player characters can even get involved in the adventure in the first place and what their objectives are during that adventure. One is the classic investigative group from Miskatonic University who are looking for a missing professor, and the other is a group of criminal bootleggers wanting to move in on that territory. And both storylines offer us completely different experiences because their motivations and objectives are completely different. It's set in Massachusetts in the 1920s, and though the module states that it's in 1926, the very first handout and everything after that says 1928. So keepers, unless you plan on change the handout, I suggest that you just say that it's set in 1928, but the specific year that it is really doesn't matter as long as we're doing this during the time of Prohibition. In fact, you could easily change this location from Massachusetts to just about anywhere in the States, depending on where your particular campaign is set. Between the mythos horrors and the bad guys, combat is pretty much going to be guaranteed for this adventure, making the scenario pretty lethal to do. So what I'm going to do is offer my tips, my criticisms, and offer a few ideas as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm here to give it to you from a player's side of things as I get to relive the time that we wiped a small New England town off the face of a map.
But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here. Send your game masters this way to see about running Blackwater Creek for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, your favorite TV show is going to get canceled and removed from streaming services forever. Okay, Game Masters, let's do this. But first, the backstory. In the 1600s, settlers of Cade's Rest discovered a mythos entity linked to a nearby cave. The resulting conflict wiped out a native tribe, the town itself, and the cave being collapsed through gunpowder explosions. Fast forward to the 1920s, the present day. 4 months ago, Miskatonic archaeology team, led by Dr. Henry Rhodes, began an excavation of the lost settlement of Cade's Rest just outside of where the town of Blackwater Creek now stands. Inside of a collapsed cave, he discovered the Earth's Womb, a fragment of the mythos entity Shub-Niggurath, one of my favorite mythos gods and my absolute least favorite name of a mythos god. Dr. Rhodes decided to cancel the expedition early, sending the students back to Arkham and to study this cave just alone with he and his wife Abigail. Unfortunately, Abigail fell victim to the entity's power and fused with the cave wall, and then a spring began flowing from the cave, but the waters of that spring were tainted with the goddess's amniotic fluid. Anyone or anything drinking the water from this cave becomes tainted with what's called the Mother's Gift. So this new stream ran alongside the fields of the Carmody brothers, some local bootleggers, and it was making their crops grow, extra fast and extra huge, and giving their whiskey a powerful kick. The brothers noticed Dr. Rhodes creeping around the stream, and believing him to be snooping around and possibly, this great crops that they were having, or their operation for bootlegging, they kidnapped him. Meanwhile, the town of Blackwater Creek is slowly becoming more and more corrupted with this tainted water and the goddess's psychic presence that's now kind of emanating further and further out from this cave. And as the Comedy Brothers are shipping out their whiskey, that corruption that's now inside of it is spreading across New England. The scenario provides us with a timeline of events for all this, which I really greatly appreciate. Okay, so the adventure offers us two different hooks for this. First is the Miskatonic faculty, friends, students, or private investigators sent by the university to find this missing Dr. Rhodes and his wife Abigail. This is the one that we used when we played it. In that hook, the investigators are given the contact information for the students who had been at the dig site in case the player characters want to go and interview them and get a little bit of information about the dig and about Blackwater Creek before they go.
Which led to a really great scene because one of those students had gone insane and he had dropped out of school in order to take care of his sick mother. So we go over to his house and we're talking to him and we're interviewing him, and he's obviously nervous and jittery. We had picked up on that. Then he's like, "Hey, hold on real quick. I gotta go upstairs and bring some food up to my sick mom." And we're like, "Okay, you go right ahead." So he takes his little tray of food upstairs. We hear him talking for a bit. He comes back down with the old tray of food, but none of that food had been eaten. Nobody had touched that. That's when we started looking around the house, and we noticed there weren't no photographs of any mother or any women at all. No sign that anybody else lived in that house. That's when we found out that his mom had died when he was a little kid, and he never knew his mother at all. But something was causing him to hallucinate that he had an ill mother upstairs that he had to protect and serve. So we made a few phone calls, and he won himself a free vacation to Arkham Asylum, and hopefully they give him the help he needs, though it never worked for me. Anyway, this worked as a fantastic foreshadowing that something creepy was going on with Blackwater Creek, and it had something to do with mothers.
The second hook is that the player characters are a group of Boston mobsters being sent by their boss to either strong-arm the Carmody brothers into working for him or to learn the secrets of what makes their whiskey so potent. It is a really cool hook, and I really like the scene with the mob boss washing the blood from his hands after he's, been done interrogating a guy to find out where this whiskey is coming from, and he's giving the player characters the job now. But it also lacks that foreshadowing of what's waiting for them once they arrive in Blackwater Creek. So my suggestion here is maybe have the boss casually mention that the player characters might want to look into the Carmody brothers before leaving Boston. Get a little bit of information before they leave, or maybe the boss knows someone who used to run booze for the brothers but has kind of dropped out of the life. And, this could give the investigators the opportunity to talk to this person and meet this small-time bootlegger that's retired to take care of an imagined ailing mother and get that little bit of foreshadowing that they need. Now, one thing I love about this scenario is that in order to help ease the new keepers and Call of Cthulhu or just, investigative horror games in general, is that this scenario is packed with Game Master tips. Not just for running the scenario itself, but there is a lot of really good information for Game Masters and advice here, so I can never praise this aspect enough. As the characters head into town, there's a couple NPCs they might run into along the way, but one idea that I got from John Hook, who I do the Modern Mythos podcast with, is to add a little bit of foreshadowing to this by having the player characters encounter a corrupted animal on the road into Blackwater Creek, such as a deer that's got antlers, sprouting out, down its back, or maybe a rabbit that's covered with tumors and maybe has a second head. So maybe the player characters, they're driving along, they see this thing dart across the road, and they have to make a drive auto check to, keep from going off the road or missing it, as it runs across in front of them. And they only get a glimpse of this thing, but it's enough to be pretty dang unsettling and be able to see that that was not a normal animal. For the town itself, we get a pretty nice map. I only wish that it didn't have the Rhodes campsite and dig site clearly marked on it, as those reveal information that the player characters should be discovering rather than just have handed on the map to them. And also because those are specific locations that really deal with the Miskatonic team, and maybe if they had asked the grad students before they came, they would know where those are, but they really don't involve the bootlegger team at all if they were doing the bootlegger gag, so I really wish these weren't marked out loud on the map. A keeper map and a player map I think would have been better. We also get maps for both the Jarvie farm and the Carmody farm and the farmhouse, where the player characters go, and what they do once they reach Blackwater Creek is completely dependent on whatever the reasons are for coming, so the module simply offers us the characters and the locations of Blackwater Creek. Now, one location that I feel could have a little bit more to it is Widow Hawkins's abandoned shack. She was recently murdered by the cult for voicing concerns over the changes that were beginning to take place in the town. However, outside of a passing comment when they meet the veterinarian as they're coming in, nothing sends the player characters to her old shack. So maybe have one of the locals mention how this widow was someone who Dr. Rhodes had interviewed a few times. He had gone to her, learned a little bit of the history of the town or anything around it because she's been here a long time. And everybody knew that he had kind of taken a liking to interviewing her, so maybe they could ask her exactly where Dr. Rhodes might be, and that would be a good excuse to send the player characters to her place and discover that it's been abandoned.
Or some unscrupulous local, like Hector Winnie, for example, because Hector's pretty unscrupulous right there. They know that the place has been abandoned. Might not know what happened to the widow, but they know that she ain't there right now. So they tell the player characters that that is their shack, and they offer to let the PC stay there for a good price. So now the player characters, they're wandering around this place, kind of finding out what all there is to find out, and that's going to draw the attention of the sheriff that knows that ain't nobody supposed to be inside that shack. So this gives the player characters a good excuse to go inside the widow's shack, as well as a good excuse to meet the sheriff.
When dealing with the locals, the players can notice the signs of corruption from the mother's gift on a successful spot hidden roll, noticing the boils and the pustules that's going on. These mutations are not immediately obvious. Unfortunately, the module's art makes the residents look horrifically diseased or like zombies, meaning the keepers might become confused as to how apparent this corruption is and not be able to show this art to their players because it makes the locals look far worse than they should outwardly look at first. So when I ran this, the player characters first encounter the kids in the town square. Asked them a few questions. The kids were enthralled by the player character's fancy car, and they were dirty and unkempt, but they didn't look sick. However, when the player characters made their spot hidden, they saw that their gums were, these kids were pitted with boils and sores, and on a really good spot hidden roll, if they got a hard or extreme, one of the player characters noticed what looked like this little white worm wiggling in one of these open mouth sores.
Hey kid, how would you like to earn yourself a dime if you can tell me where... Oh my god! Fetch. Oh my god, that was awful. Ugh. Feel like I gotta brush my teeth now.
At the dam and pond, the investigators encounter some of the weird creatures, including some trees that have turned into these embryonic dark young. While they're significantly weaker than full dark young are, these things are bad news. They have armor, they take minimum damage from firearms, and their strength drain is devastating because the loss of strength is permanent for the player characters. Now, I would also be willing to allow the mother's gift to restore some of those lost strength points as it does with scars or lost limbs as well as at level 2. But keepers be warned, make sure that your players have an opportunity to possibly notice these killer trees before they're suddenly attacked by them. Maybe give a little bit of foreshadowing or a good chance for them to notice something's going on. The big climactic scene will likely be at the comedy farm. Aside from fighting 4 bootleggers who are all armed with shotguns, there's Brennan Comedy, who is transformed into some sort of horrible abomination. Now, one of his abilities is to control vermin swarms, rats or venomous snakes, they're all coming out of these mutated cornfields. Unfortunately, the stats for these swarms don't appear in the module, referring that they check out the Call of Cthulhu Keeper Guide for those stats. No big deal, but I do find it annoying to have to open a secondary book in order to get stats, so keepers probably print that out or bookmark your book as where you can find them. That way you can have easy access when the adventure's going on. You don't have to stop the book and flip through it. In the farmhouse basement, the player characters can find Dr. Rhodes, who's undergone several mutations himself, but is also thoroughly insane from all his ordeals.
That was an exciting scene for us, because not only are we fighting a bunch of desperate bootleggers and some sort of horrible abomination that's charging us out of the cornfield, but before that fight had started, we set those cornfields on fire, right? Because we're like, if we don't make it through this, at least we take that corn out with us. So as we're fighting, it's at night, it's backlit by all these orange flames that are getting closer and closer, and then a little bit too close, and it sets that barn on fire, which sets off all those barrels of hooch stored inside, and it explodes in this huge fireball. So now we're rushing inside the house trying to get that doctor and get the hell out of there before that fire circles around too much and prevents our escape. Good times.
One area that the investigators don't have to visit to complete the adventure, but probably are going to visit, is the cave itself. Deep inside, they'll discover the horrifically mutated form of Abigail Rhodes, now spread out over 100 feet wide and with the spring's tainted water gushing from her. Shapes press against her from within, the soon-to-be birthed monsters that are growing inside her. One detail that I added is the module says that this fluid is coming from this massive twisted flesh, but since the module also says that this water is tainted with amniotic fluid and that we also have this whole birthing and mother motif going on, I said that the water just wasn't pouring from her herself, but it was actually pouring from her monstrous and kind of mutated
Yeah, man, we got it. You don't need to keep going with that. And thank you from all you players for burning that mental picture into their heads. Y'all pulsing and wreathed in writhing tentacles. And yeah, thanks for that.
If they use the dynamite that's found in the cave, the player characters can kill Abigail and seal the cave off and stop this mythos threat from spreading any further. Now, one area that does need talking about is the corruption of the mother's gift. Every time the player characters drink any of the water, or eat any of the tainted food, or the whiskey, or even come in contact with the seeping boils or blood of the infected, they have to make a con roll in order to avoid moving up one level of corruption. And this might require a hard or an extreme con roll depending on what type of exposure it is. Now, don't tell the players why they're making these con checks periodically, but the players are smart. They're going to start figuring it out after they do it a few times. There are 7 stages to this corruption. The first 2 are actually pretty good. In fact, when we played it, we had one character who had these horrific facial scars from a previous adventure where she stuck her head up in an attic that she probably shouldn't have, and there was a monster up there and it tore her face up a bit. So her appearance had been drastically lowered from that. But when she passed into the second level of corruption, those facial scars began fading and her appearance returned to how it had originally been. So it was actually pretty good for her that she got up to the second level of corruption. After the second level, it goes downhill pretty quickly as their bodies mutate and their minds become stripped away, devolving into monsters by the 7th stage. My only problem is that because it only requires 2 hours between exposures before another con save is required, it is conceivable that a character could drop all the way down to the 7th level in a single day. Meanwhile, the people who are living in Blackwater Creek who've been drinking this water and whiskey for a couple months now, most of them are only at the 3rd level of exposure. So my suggestion here is to lengthen the spacing that's between con saves. When they have to do a con save, maybe have it be where it's 2 hours, then 4, then 6, then 8, or maybe you could have it be where it has to be a 24-hour period between them, or something just to kind of lengthen that out a bit.
Now for our game, after we met that traveling veterinarian and he told us about all the mutated animals, and then we saw those kids with their wormy, disgusting mouth sores, we went straight into that general store and we bought all the Coca-Cola that they had. And that is all that we drank through the rest of the adventure.
Also, if these characters are going to be part of a longer campaign rather than just a single one-shot adventure, then I'd have it be where when the Earth's womb is sealed, you could drop their corruption level by 1 or 2, just over the course of the following days as this corruption begins fading from them because it hadn't permanently set at whatever level it was. I think when we did it, we dropped it by 1 level after a week had passed. Now, while this adventure can go in a lot of different ways, and no 2 groups are going to have the same experience playing it, let me go ahead and give you a quick rundown of how our group did it, as well as some of the changes that I had to make because of how they went about doing it. So, the characters were asked by the Miskatonic University to locate their missing professor, and they interviewed the grad students from the expedition, including the insane Walt Gehring, giving that little bit of foreshadowing that they needed having to deal with mothers. Now, arriving in town, they met the sheriff and the store owner, the children, and explored around a bit. After that, they headed to the dig site, poked around, checked out the dry creek bed, and did some general exploring before they're making their way to the Jarvie farm. At the farm, they found the note, then during the storm, old Pete went crazy and choked to death while Malcolm Jarvie was gored to death by Brutus the maddened pig. Sufficiently freaked out, the player characters left the farm the next day and found the Rhodes camp, which they learned of from Edith Jarvie. From there, they headed around to the pond, witnessed the strangest there, then followed the creek past all the giant deformed plants to the cave. Inside the cave, they discovered the mother's womb. There was an incredible fight. One of the player characters died, but they managed to blow the cave up and escape. The survivors were in pretty rough shape by this point. They had been battered down quite a bit, so they drove the 6 miles west to Dunwich to get themselves patched up. That was the first session. So the next session began, where it started about a week after that. So the player characters, they managed to heal up some in Dunwich, but they still hadn't found Dr. Rhodes, which was their whole point for going, so they needed to return to Blackwater Creek. However, the players had already cleared cleared all but one of the major locations, so I needed to buff it up a little bit. I needed a full session's worth of stuff to do. And also, I needed to figure out what had happened at Blackwater Creek in those days that the player characters had been gone and since they had killed the mother. So what I decided was that all the moonshine that had already shipped out had affected many of the people in the neighboring towns as far as way to Boston. Now, stage 4 of the corruption means that the afflicted is inexplicably drawn to Blackwater Creek. So on the drive to town, they encountered several hitchhikers that were obviously showing signs of this corruption as they were headed to Blackwater Creek.
Oh man, that was great. So we're driving back to Blackwater Creek, right? And we stop for this dude on the side of the road who's got his thumb out. And we're like, hey buddy, where you going? He's like, I'm going to Blackwater Creek. And we're like, cool, so are we. Hop on in. And then he smiles all big, all like, thanks. That's when we see those wormy sores on the inside of his mouth. And I ain't ever hit the gas so hard in my life. Just zoom, and we were out of there.
Then once they got back into town, they realized that Blackwater Creek had gone full-on Children of the Corn level culty. So with the mother dead, the sheriff had punished the Jarvies for taking in these outsiders who had then killed their gods. They had crucified them on these crosses made from the lashed corn stalks before the cave mouth as an offering. He'd also put a serious bounty on the player characters' heads, meaning that the flood of new believers that were coming into town were also being used to manually dig the cave back open. As they were arriving in, they were handed a shovel and said, unearth our God. And the church itself had turned into almost this kind of revival with all these worshipers singing and dancing inside of it, trying to bring the mother back. But all the crosses at the church had either been taken down or covered up with these woven corn stalks into kind of a vaguely vulva shape.
And that was the first time in our careers that we seriously considered setting fire to a packed church of people. The first time.
The dam was still intact, so the comedies were just using the pond water that was still there to irrigate their fields, so the player characters stole a tractor, tore down the dam, and made their assault on the bootlegger's farm, destroyed all the remaining whiskey, and rescued Dr. Rhodes. Mission complete, the characters fled Blackwater Creek and had the federal authorities sent in there because strange things going on. So the feds stormed the land, and in a scene reminiscent of Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, put an end to Blackwater Creek forever, and the town was completely evacuated and burned down. Professor Rhodes ended up in an asylum, and everyone else lived happily ever after. Sort of. Now, mileage may vary, and your player characters are likely going to approach this from a completely different angle than mine did. However, if you do find yourself having to split the game out over multiple sessions or have it take place over several in-game days, I strongly suggest that you have that influx of level 4 corrupted pilgrims from all the neighboring towns and probably have that start around the same time that the player characters arrive in town. So they're new in town at the same time maybe the first of these pilgrims arrives, and then every little bit you could have more and more start arriving as the adventure is going on, rather than maybe where mine was, where they left town and they come back and then they discover this is what's happened. Maybe start that trickle just around the same time that PCs get there.
That seriously ratcheted up the tension for us because the number of cultists in this town was just growing and growing and growing, and we realized that this wasn't some sort of isolated event to this little town. This was possibly a world-changing situation. Now, that motivates a player character like saving the world.
Those changes and my few complaints aside, Blackwater Creek is a solid adventure with a lot going for it. Keepers just need to prepare for it in case it lasts multiple sessions, and they need to buff it up a little bit in order to pad it like I did, and be warned about the corruption just in case they want to use these characters again. Give them a way that maybe that can lower a bit once they've completed the adventure. You can find the scenario along with misdos, which I've also reviewed, in the Keeper Screen Pack. Available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG, or pick up the physical one from the Chaosium website. It is a great screen and comes with 2 fun adventures, so I recommend picking it up.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews or how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, investigators, you have a great day. You forgot to mention how we were able to link this adventure about a year later to the other adventure, Madness in London Town, which also features Shub-Niggurath and her milk. And it was like a bombshell moment when the PCs recognized that sickly sweet smell was the same sickly sweet smell from Blackwater Creek, and they were like, oh my god, here we go again. And then a couple years after that, we were playing the modern day scenario Panacea, which also has Shub-Niggurath and a milk and mutations sessions, and it was like a bombshell moment when the players figured out that this was the same thing, right? You could have made Panacea a sequel to Blackwater Creek. That'd be great. Instead of it being a bunch of cho-cho that are operating that evil pharmaceutical company, right? You could have it be where it was those kids that were in Blackwater Creek, right? They've now grown up, though they're not as old as they really should be for being that age. Maybe they took one of those infant Doc Young from Blackwater Creek and they raised it as their own, and that's the Doc Young that's in Panacea. Oh my God, these two are totally linkable. You really screwed the pooch by not tying those two adventures together.